Hey guys, Toku Gamer here again with another deck profile, and this time we're highlighting Blackluster Soldier. The weirdest thing is getting, how I actually found out about this deck was through a friend. He actually was playing Blackluster Soldier, and it actually got me interested, and I started looking into the cards, and then I built this deck. So I just wanted to share it with you guys to see if it would help anybody, and also to show off my deck profile because I love making these videos. So let's get started into this. So first off, you run, of course, the original Blackluster Soldier. Pretty cool card. He doesn't really do anything on his own, but when you use very specific ritual monsters, he actually becomes pretty powerful. So, yep, and then we run 3 of the brand new Blackluster Super Soldier, of course. Pretty awesome card. His ability allows him, whenever he attacks a monster and destroys it successfully and sends it to the grave. This does not count pendulums, surprisingly, I found out, because the pendulums are going to the extra deck, so they do not count. Only if a monster hits a graveyard, just to be specific, so nobody has any issues with that. Basically, when he destroys a monster, he inflicts the same amount of damage equal to the original attack. Same as a kind of like a Flame Wingman effect. If anybody's played Heroes knows. Basically, you just hit them for damage, and most of the time when you're summoning him through rituals, you will get an additional effect from 2 other mini knights known as Beginning Knight and Twilight Knight, and you can combo with him to essentially banish your entire opponent's field and just hit for 3,000 twice because of their effects. Okay, then after those, you run one, of course, since it's a Blackluster deck, Blackluster Envoy of the Beginning. Pretty sweet card. I mean, you know, banish a light and dark, summon him out, special summon him, and then, of course, banish one monster. Or if the player, if this attacking card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, after damage calculation, he can make a second attack. So, 3,000, 3,000. So, you're hitting for 6,000, essentially, if... Well, not 6,000, but, I mean, you're doing the damage and then hitting for another 3,000, so that's a pretty decent chunk of damage to your opponent. Then, of course, one Gaia, or charging Gaia the Fierce Knight. This guy's, essentially, he's just there for defense purposes, especially for my deck. His ability allows him to essentially be normal summoned, like the old school way, except instead of 2,300, he'll go down to 1,900. Which is a sacrifice, but I mean, like it's like summoning a level 4, right? So, and you're getting one with 1,900 attack, that's pretty decent already, and he can hit through some things, at least. So, always good to have him. And also, whenever Blackluster Super Soldier's effect, whenever he is destroyed, he can special summon one of these guys from the deck or the graveyard. So, essentially, even if you lose your Super Soldier, you still have some protection with Gaia. And he's a pretty good monster, so it's not too bad to run one of him at least. I mean, most people run like maybe 3 or 2, but I feel that 1 already kind of works, because you don't really need to like have a bunch of them clogging up your deck, especially since this can be revived from the graveyard and or be summoned from the deck. So it's not too bad. Then, of course, one Spear Karibo, because his effect is actually pretty cool for, like, let's say first turn you draw him, but you don't draw the necessary materials for a ritual. He can basically protect you, because when your opponent attacks, you can discard him, and then he switches that monster to defense mode. So the attack is negated, and he can't do anything. So, always good to have him in the deck. And, of course, his secondary effect, when you ritual summon a monster, you can banish this card from the graveyard as one of the monsters required for the ritual summon. So he also helps out with the ritual summons too. So he's a pretty cool card. And of course the artwork, I mean, dude, like look at Karibo, he looks pretty sweet. It's pretty cute. Then, of course, Super Soldier Soul. I actually recently discovered this card by accident when I was using the Blackluster deck online. It's actually a really cool card because essentially you can discard a Blackluster and he gains that attack and defense from them, essentially becoming a Blackluster. He doesn't gain the effects, but he gains the attack. And then when he's destroyed, he searches either Beginning or Evening Twilight Knight that you need for the ritual. So either way, he gives you protection and or searching. So good to at least have one in your deck. I mean, some people don't really run him, but it's actually a pretty cool card because it's useful for searching mainly, and it's always a good thing to bring out your ritual monsters as soon as possible. Then, of course, here are the knights that I've been talking about. Evening, Twilight, Night, 2 of them, and then 2 of Beginning Night. These guys are essentially what you will be using for your rituals. Evening, Twilight, Night, essentially when he's tributed, he passes on 2 once per turn abilities. His is, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls, banish it, and then once per turn you can banish 1 random card from your opponent's hand, and then when he is banished from the graveyard, he can search out a ritual monster, so usually this will search you out Blackluster, Super Soldier, or Normal, and get them in your hand as soon as possible. Then Beginning Night has similar effects, but he has the banish part, but he also has one that allows you to make a second attack if you destroy a monster. Essentially what Envoy of the Beginning had. These 2 basically turn your normal Super Soldier into Envoy of the Beginning. And then, of course, when he's banished, you can search out 1 ritual spell card from your deck, so these 2 are crucial. They essentially help you search out and give your Blackluster Super Soldier some really awesome effects that can help you win the game. Then, of course, after them, I have one of the newer cards from Raging Tempest, Envoy of Chaos. He's like a mini Super Soldier, and his ability is pretty decent. Essentially, he can be discarded during a battle or anything. Like, let's say your opponent is attacking you, right, and your Gaia and or Blackluster is too weak, essentially, to take the attack. You can discard him, and then he will essentially give his 1500 attack power to that monster, and essentially, I don't know, best way to sum it up, he's basically Honest, but for Blacklusters. And of course, his secondary effect is what helps out your deck a lot. Essentially, when he is in the grave at the end of your, at the end phase, you can banish 1 light and 1 dark to get him back into your hand. So he will continuously be in your hand no matter what, and he helps you banish both Beginning and Twilight Night to essentially get their searches off. And of course, having this in your hand and having a Gaia or Blackluster that can potentially be destroyed, you can just discard him and just help them out, essentially. Then, 2 white dragons, 2 black dragons. Essentially, these guys are there for XYZ material and or banishing out the knights, essentially. They're also there for added protection just in case, because that way you can discard one of these. Essentially, this one you have to banish a light to summon him, and then this one you have to banish a dark, so they work off of each other synergy-wise. So, also, they're both light and dark types, so if you draw them into your hand and you have the ritual spell, you can just go straight into Blackluster Soldier. And then for the final monsters, 3 Manju of the 10,000 Hands. This card is your main searcher engine of the deck, because his effect is when he's normal or flip summoned, you can add 1 ritual monster card or 1 ritual spell from your deck to your hand. And essentially, this will get you Blackluster or Super Soldier Synthesis or Super Soldier Ritual immediately. So basically, he helps you get the missing piece. So that's all for the monsters. Let's move on to the spells. Pretty standard lineup, of course. 3 Super Soldier Synthesis cards. These cards are basically your main ritual cards of the deck, and basically you send 1 light and dark from either your hand or your deck, and vice versa. You can send 1 dark and 1 light from your deck. So 1 light from your hand and 1 dark, and then 1 dark, you know how it is. And then basically, as long as you have either a Blackluster in your graveyard or in your hand, you can summon it. And the downside to this card is that you can only special summon or use this card once during a turn, so that's the only bad time, but it's actually a pretty good card. I mean, it eliminates the need for having the monsters on your field, so there's a plus there. And if you already have the monsters in your hand, you can just straight up just go for Blackluster Super Soldier and just be done with it and just wreck your opponent. Then, of course, 1 Super Soldier Ritual. This card is pretty good. I mean, it's like the old style rituals, but at the same time, it has that added clause of saying that you can tribute monsters from your hand, so it's kind of like Super Soldier Synthesis, but you still have to have at least one monster on the field that can help with summoning it. So that's the only downside of it, and why you only one of it. But its secondary effect allows you to banish one light and one dark monster from your graveyard, and special summon one Blackluster from your graveyard and or hand. So essentially, if you lose a Blackluster using this, you can resummon it with it. So it has basically a protection plan built in. So no matter what, you still get your monsters off. And if, let's say, you use Beginning and Twilight Knight, you can essentially get off their searches again and just get another Blackluster and all the ritual materials you need into your hand. So this card's pretty good, but usually most decks run about one of these because it's not as good as Super Soldier Synthesis, which is the one you essentially need to run 3 of. This one is already good enough at 1. You could run it at 2 if you want more coverage for the rituals, but at that point it might clog the deck, so I highly recommend just 1. Then, 2 Gateway to Chaos. This is also another searcher because when any monster is sent to the grave, it gets a counter. And then once you get about 3 counters, you can detach those counters and then search 1 ritual card. Essentially, you search a ritual spell card, and when this is summoned, it actually allows you to add 1 Blackluster Super Soldier, or just any Blackluster Soldier or Gaia the Fierce Knight to your hand. So essentially, this will net you what you need no matter what if you draw it first turn. And of course, the added effect of, being able to add a spell or trap card when you really need it. So, pretty good card. Then of course, since you run so many level 8s, you run 2 trade-ins. Usually, most run it at 3, but 2 is already a pretty good number for it. I mean, you could run 3 and it would help a little bit more, but occasionally you will brick and actually get 2 of these with no Blackluster soldiers. So it's always better to just run 2 and just occasionally get it. But it does help you draw about 2 cards, so it's a staple for this deck. 2 Twin Twisters, staple card, take out some backfield, but discard a card for it. Pretty simple. 1 Dark Hole. This deck could run 2, but 1 Dark Hole already seems pretty good enough with all my playtesting, so it's pretty good. Then, of course, 1 Reinforcements of the Army. It really sucks this card is at 1, because if I could have multiples up to 3, it would make it much easier to get all the materials and everything, but with just 1, it's still okay. And then, Old School Raigeki. Clears fields. Pretty decent if your opponent has everything on the ability and you don't want to waste your Blackluster's ability on them. So, good card to have. That's all the spell cards. Now it's on to the traps. This deck actually runs a pretty small trap card lineup, so it'll just be pretty quick. 1 Beginning of Heaven and Earth. Essentially, this card will help you search out Blackluster or a Gaia that you need for your ritual. Basically, you just reveal 3, and then your opponent has to pick 1 randomly after you shuffle them. So, no matter what, you win if you were to say, like, let's say you put out 1 Blackluster, 1 Blackluster Envoy, and then 1 Super Soldier. You win anyway, no matter what. Except, I mean, like, you lose Envoy, but at the same time, if he picks Envoy, oh man, you're just set. You will essentially win. And then 1 Bottomless Trap Hole, because staple, really good card, takes out anything when it's summoned. Then, of course, 2 Quaking Mirror Forces. This card is top in the meta right now, so you gotta have at least maybe 2, maybe 3, depending on your deck and your preference. I run 2 because it's just the right amount of a number for me to use. Then, for the final card, we have Solemn Warning. Staple, negates for 2,000. Then, that's basically all for the main deck. I do run an extra deck, but I rarely tap into it, but it's always good to have at least maybe a small one. First off, 2 Blade Armor Ninjas. Pretty decent card. Summon it. 2 level 4 warriors, and this entire deck is a warrior base, so you can go for that. 1 Utopia, of course. I don't really have lightning for this deck, but he's still pretty good alone. Then, of course, 1 Heroic Champion for old school purposes. Doubles his attack to 4,000 and he can hit. Abyss Dweller, every deck needs 1. Stops your opponent's graveyard effects. Getting this first turn is pretty sweet. I run Galaxy Eye's Full Armor Photon Dragon because of his effect. Then, of course, a number 23 Lancelot Dark Knight. This guy's really awesome. If you can get 2 Black Lusters out and you summon him, you can just straight up just hit your opponent directly and negate stuff. So he's pretty awesome for this deck. Then, of course, one of the new ones, Aegon the Sea Castrum. He basically just steals an extra deck monster and becomes that extra deck monster. So pretty sweet to steal one of your opponents. And then, of course, another ace, essentially, number 38, Hope Harbinger Dragon. He's essentially like an XYZ version of Crystal Wing, and that's why you gotta have him. And of course, he's level 8, so that works perfectly with Black Luster. And that's basically the deck. Yeah, that's basically the entire deck. This deck does have a lot of issues. I'm not saying it doesn't, but with how the Link Summon format is going to be changing the entire game, essentially, running rituals could work. Like, I'm predicting that this deck might have some success rate, especially if with Black Luster Super Soldier's ability of banishing, you can essentially get rid of your opponent's Link monsters and everything they just summoned with that Link monster. So it would be a good idea to run rituals, but at the same time, one of the key main bad parts about them is they are a little bit slower, because if you do not get the ritual monster and the ritual spell together in your hand, it's kind of hard to actually bring them out unless you have really good searchers. And mind you, this deck has really good searchers, like Evening Twilight, but most of them require you to banish first before you can actually even search. So I would say this deck could work, but at the same time, you would need to... Basically, you'd have to have the best hand, essentially, and that's not always going to be a guarantee. Most of the time, you get a pretty consistent hand of pretty decent monsters for stalling. So essentially, this deck boils down to stalling or one-hit turn kills, essentially. But it is a really good deck, and I highly recommend like getting into it, because a lot of the cards that I just showed you, aside from maybe a few of the XYZ monsters, are really cheap and easy to get. Like, most of the Black Luster cards I got for less than $40. So it's a good budget deck too, because most of the cards are like the old style stuff, so they're not that bad in price, and most of them are easy to obtain. Some of them are commons in the tins and everything. So if you want a good deck that can stand up to Link monsters, then I would highly recommend this deck. Alright, well, thanks for watching, and I will be back again for another deck profile hopefully soon. See you later.